My wife said yes to her friend moving in without really asking me. And 4 months later, I'm eating alone while they laugh in the next room and pretending it's fine. I want you to picture something for a second. You're in your own home, you paid for it, you cook the meals, you walk the dogs, you fix what's broken, and somehow you've become the one sitting alone in a back room while 2 other people eat dinner together in the living room like you don't exist. That's where I ended up, and honestly, I still don't fully understand how I got there. My name's not important. What is important is that I've been with my wife for 20 years. 20. We got together young, built something real, and eventually made the move to a big city together to start fresh. No kids, that was always the plan. Just us, 2 dogs, a house we're proud of, and the life we'd put together piece by piece. For most of that time, things were good. Not perfect. No 20-year relationship is perfect, but solid. I work from home in IT. Good job, flexible schedule, and because of that, I'd naturally taken on more of the domestic stuff over the years. Cooking, cleaning, errands. I accepted it. If I'm the one here all day, it makes sense that I'd handle more of the household. I'm not going to pretend I was some resentful martyr about it. I genuinely didn't mind. I like cooking. I'm good at it. But I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as this story unfolds, because it matters. About a year ago, my wife told me about a friend of hers from work. Her name was Alice, 24 years old. They'd grown close at her job, and when Alice left that position, they stayed in touch. Alice had been living with her boyfriend. He was covering basically everything, rent, bills, all of it. When they broke up, she had nowhere to go. My wife came to me and asked if Alice could move into our guest bedroom. Temporarily, just long enough to get back on her feet, save some money, and find her own place. And I said yes, because I thought I was doing something kind. I thought I knew Alice. We'd hung out plenty of times when she was dating her ex. She was funny, easy to be around. I had no reason to say no. We set the rent at $200 a month. I added $50 on top of that because I'd be cooking for her at least 4 days a week. The plan was simple. She saves up, she moves out. Clean and easy. It was not clean. It was not easy. From the first day Alice moved in, something felt off. Not dramatically off. I couldn't point to one moment and say that was it. It was more like a slow chill that settled into the house. She would come downstairs in the mornings, make her breakfast, and act like I wasn't standing 5 feet away. Not rudely, not aggressively, just nothing. No good morning, no eye contact, no acknowledgement that another human being was in the room. I figured, okay, she's adjusting. Give her time. So I kept saying good morning every day. And every day, nothing. I stopped saying it after about 2 weeks. She'd come home from work in the afternoon, usually an hour or two before my wife, and go straight to her room. Door closed. I'd be in the kitchen prepping dinner, and it was like I didn't exist. Then my wife would come home, and Alice's door would open like a switch had been flipped. She'd come out, sit at the table, talk, laugh, have a whole personality. And the second dinner was done, she'd disappear again. Now look, I want to be clear about something, and I know how this sounds, but I'm going to say it anyway. I never did anything. I never stared at her, never said anything inappropriate, never made her feel uncomfortable in any way that I'm aware of. I know the second an older guy says something like that, half of you are already rolling your eyes. I get it. But it's true. I kept my distance. I was respectful. I was actually going out of my way to be normal and welcoming, and I was getting a wall in return. I started to feel something I didn't expect to feel in my own house. I started feeling like a creep, like my presence itself was the problem. I'd come home from the gym in the evenings, walk into the living room where she'd be sitting with headphones on, and she would get up and go to her room. Not a word, just leave. Because I walked in. Now you tell me, what are you supposed to do with that? I brought it up with my wife early on. I told her it felt weird. She brushed it off, said Alice was probably just trying to be respectful, not wanting to overstep with her friend's husband. And honestly, I thought that might be right. I gave it more time. But meanwhile, I was still cooking, still planning meals, still shopping on my lunch breaks, still doing everything I always did. Except now I was doing it for someone who treated me like furniture, while my wife's response to the whole thing was a shrug and a give it time. There was a Sunday about 2 months in where everything kind of broke open. I'd spent hours on a proper dinner. Marinated chicken, roasted vegetables, the whole thing. Put it in the oven, set the timer. Came back 40 minutes later and the oven was off. I don't know how it happened. Maybe I bumped it, maybe I miscounted the buttons. The chicken was close to done, but the vegetables were still raw. I came out and explained what happened, told them to go ahead and order something. They did, and then they laughed about it, for a while. Now you might think, okay, that's not a big deal. People laugh at kitchen mishaps. And you'd be right, except for this. They were watching the Olympics while I planned, shopped, marinated, prepped, and cooked. Neither of them had asked once if I needed help. Neither of them had lifted a finger. And when the one thing I put hours into didn't work out, the response was laughter. Not, oh, that's such a bummer after all that work. Just laughter. I didn't yell, I didn't storm off. But something in me just quietly decided, I'm done. I'll cook for myself. They can figure it out. And that's when things got really bad. My wife stopped talking to me, not in a dramatic, explosive way, in a cold, deliberate way. She'd come home, Alice would emerge from her room, they'd order food, and I would just not be included, not spoken to. They'd have their evening, and I'd sit somewhere else in my own house wondering how I became invisible in a home I pay for. I told myself for weeks that I was overreacting, that I was being sensitive, that if I just held on, things would sort themselves out. They didn't sort themselves out. I want to tell you something I've been sitting with for a long time now, and I want you to think about it. I make 3 times what my wife makes. I pay essentially every bill in our house. I do the majority of the cooking and cleaning. I went with my wife to clean her second job. She took on an office cleaning gig for extra money, and I helped her do it nearly every week so it would take half the time. Why? Because I love her. Because I wanted to support her. Because showing up for the people you love is just what you do. And somewhere along the way, I became the person who shows up for everyone else while no one particularly notices. And when I stop, everyone gets annoyed. Does that resonate with anyone? I really want to know, is that just me? Because I'm starting to wonder. By month 3, I was in individual therapy. My wife refused to go to couples counseling. Her reason was brief. I'm not doing that. I didn't push it because I know she had a rough experience with therapy when she was young after losing her mother, so I went alone. And my therapist was pretty clear with me. I wasn't wrong to feel uncomfortable. I wasn't wrong to feel taken for granted. But I needed to work on making expectations clearer earlier before resentment accumulated. Good advice, hard to apply when the other person doesn't want to engage. Around month 4, I found out a few things that changed how I understood the situation. Alice had been spending most weekends with her ex, trying to reconcile. Honestly, I was rooting for it harder than I've ever rooted for anything, because if they got back together, she'd leave. But then one weekend she came home crying. I excused myself and let my wife handle it, and from what I gathered, not snooping, just living in the same house, Alice hadn't been saving anything. When she was with her ex, he'd covered everything. She hadn't put away a single dollar toward her own place, and her plan all along had been to go back to him, not to save up and move out. She told my wife she needed 8 to 12 months to find a place with a relative. 8 to 12 months. My wife and I had agreed, verbally, clearly, multiple times, that 6 months was the limit. 6 months was fair. 6 months gave Alice more than enough time to get her finances together. But when my wife actually sat down with Alice to have the conversation, she didn't set the boundary, she just asked Alice what her plans were. And Alice said she needed more time. And my wife said, okay. I found this out when my wife came home and told me, and I want to be honest with you. I kept my voice calm, but I was devastated, not furious. Devastated. Because in that moment I realized my wife had looked at the situation, looked at me, and picked differently. She'd had a chance to choose her husband and she let her friend make the call instead. I told her that. I said, we agreed on 6 months. You didn't even tell her that. You let her set the timeline. I've been uncomfortable in my own home for months, and you knew that, and you still didn't say anything. She stormed out. Slept in the office. That next week, I wasn't okay. I'm not going to dress it up. I drank more than I should have. I stayed in bed when they got home from work. I stopped cooking for anyone. I just withdrew. I was already doing the math in my head. I was thinking about what divorce looks like. I was grieving something that hadn't officially ended yet, but felt like it already had. And then, one Saturday morning, I woke up and Alice's room was empty. Her car was gone. I didn't know what happened. I was just relieved. Like I could breathe again. My wife told me later. Alice had noticed something was wrong that week. Asked my wife about it, and my wife told her everything. That I'd been deeply uncomfortable, that I'd felt like a creep in my own home, that I'd been pushing for an end date for months. Alice, apparently, was shocked. She told my wife she thought we were all cool. She said she'd just been trying to give me space. I thought about that a lot, and I think she genuinely believed that. I think she was uncomfortable around older men, maybe for reasons that have nothing to do with me. And she expressed that by going silent, by leaving rooms, by keeping her whole existence behind a closed door. And she thought she was being considerate. She didn't realize that what she was doing was making me feel like a threat inside my own house. But here's the thing that still stings. My wife didn't tell her any of the parts where Alice was getting it wrong. She didn't mention that Alice had been misrepresenting her savings situation. She didn't mention that Alice had basically been waiting to go back to her ex the whole time. She just handed Alice my feelings without the full picture, so that Alice got to leave feeling like the wronged party. And now, less than 2 weeks after Alice moved out, my wife is planning a game night at our house with her friends from work, and Alice is on the invite list. When she told me that, she said I could choose to participate or not. So that's where I am. Alice is gone, the house is mine again, the dogs are walked, I'm back in my bedroom, and I'm in therapy, working on whatever comes next. I don't know if this marriage survives. I genuinely don't know. What I know is that I gave everything I had to keep two people comfortable, and it cost me my peace, my sense of home, and somewhere in there, a good chunk of my self-respect. If you're the kind of person who does everything for everyone, who shows up, who cooks, who cleans, who pays, who helps with the second job at night, who says yes when someone needs a place to stay, I just want to ask you this directly. At what point do you let yourself have needs too? At what point do your feelings get to count as much as everyone else's convenience? I'm still figuring that out, but I'm figuring it out. My boss screamed at me for eating lunch 30 minutes late after I spent all morning saving the company from a crisis they created. So the next time everything collapsed, I grabbed my sandwich and walked out the door exactly like he asked me to. There's a specific kind of stupid that only exists in the workplace. Not the regular kind of stupid, the kind where someone makes a mistake and learns from it. No, I'm talking about the kind where management creates a problem, ignores the solution, watches everything blow up, and then redirects their frustration at the one person who was trying to prevent the whole thing. I ran into that kind of stupid at my first IT job, and eventually I used it against them. Let me back up. I came into IT later than most people in the field. I wasn't some fresh-faced 22-year-old who'd been coding since middle school. I had decades of blue-collar work behind me, the kind of work where you figure things out with your hands, where if something breaks and you don't fix it, the job doesn't get done. Period. No one's coming to save you, you solve the problem, or you go home. That mentality, it turns out, translated pretty well to IT. I was working toward my associate's degree, specializing in networking, just a handful of general education classes away from finishing. And I'd been hired at a small business as literally the first IT person they'd ever brought on full-time. Let that sink in for a second. This company had been operating, running production, shipping products, managing a whole factory floor. Without dedicated IT support, my boss had been keeping the lights on by sheer force of stubbornness. No formal training, no real interest in learning the technical side, he just wanted someone to take it off his plate. I respected that, honestly. He knew his limits. What I didn't expect was that those limits would become my problem. The first sign of how things were going to go came about 3 days before the main event of this story. There was a computer, one specific computer, that was mission critical to the company's daily operations. This was the only machine running the shipping software. And we're not talking about a handful of packages here. Hundreds of shipments were queued up, waiting to go out. Customers waiting. Deadlines ticking. That one computer was the bottleneck for the entire outbound operation, and it was broken. Now, I've been doing my homework since I got there. I'd already set up what's called a system image, basically a perfect snapshot of the computer in a clean, fully working state. The idea is simple. Something goes catastrophically wrong. You don't spend 3 days trying to surgically remove whatever's broken. You just restore the whole thing to the last known good state. Clean, fast, reliable. I had it ready to go. I advised exactly that. Re-image the machine, get it back up in a fraction of the time, get those packages moving. The owner said no. His reasoning? He'd paid extra for tech support contracts with a few of the software vendors. He wanted to use them. He wanted to go program by program, deletion by reinstallation, phone call by phone call, because damn it, he was going to get his money's worth out of those contracts. I want you to appreciate that for a moment. The packages are sitting there. The clock is running, customers are waiting. And we're doing it the hard way, the slow way, because of sunk cost thinking. I followed orders. Of course I did. It's not my company. I made my recommendation clearly, it was declined, and I got to work doing it the owner's way. I was on the phone for hours. I didn't take a break. I didn't wander off. I stayed at my desk until the job was done, because that's how I was wired from 20 plus years of blue-collar work. You don't leave when things are broken. You finish. By the time the computer was back up and running, my scheduled lunch window had come and gone. I took my lunch late, about 30 minutes past the normal hour. Nobody told me anything in the moment. I clocked out, ate, clocked back in, walked back to my desk. My boss was standing there waiting for me, and he was furious. Not about the hours I'd put in, not about the fact that I just spent a full morning unflinching on a problem that could have been solved in 20 minutes if they'd let me do it my way. He was angry because I had taken my lunch outside the designated window. Company policy, he told me, 30 minutes, 12 to 1. That's the rule. It has to be consistent. I needed to follow it. I want to be honest with you. I held my tongue. I didn't say what I was thinking, which was something along the lines of, you want me to abandon a mission-critical repair in the middle of the most time-sensitive point, walk away from a system that affects hundreds of packages and every customer attached to them, because the clock says 12? I kept that thought to myself. I nodded. I heard him out. But I filed it away. Now, here's the part of the story where I need to explain the setup of our office because it's going to matter. We were subletters. My company didn't own the building. We rented office space inside a larger facility. That meant the physical network infrastructure, the switches, the routers, all of it, belonged to the building owner, not to us. I had zero access to that equipment. No admin credentials, no physical access to the server room, nothing. If something went wrong with the network at the infrastructure level, there was genuinely nothing I could do except document what was happening and wait. I also had a working theory about why the network kept acting up. It was a factory building. Industrial-grade woodworking machines, running at production output, generating massive electromagnetic interference. And whoever had run the Ethernet cables throughout the building had used unshielded cable, the kind that's fine in a quiet office but suffers in an environment full of high-voltage equipment. Every time those machines hit peak load, I suspected they were flooding the cables with enough interference to drop connections. I couldn't prove it. I couldn't fix it. It wasn't my network to fix. But I'd been watching the pattern, so. 3 days after the lunch lecture, it's 12:25 in the afternoon. I have not yet taken my lunch. The whole network goes down. Not one machine, not one department. Everything. Nothing can reach anything. I run a quick check. No pings going through, total loss across the board. The factory floor is affected. The office is affected. Everything that touches the network is dead. I set up Wireshark, that's a network analysis tool, to capture whatever traffic came back when the connection restored. I left a continuous ping running in the command line so I'd have a timestamp of exactly when things went down and when they came back. Documentation, evidence, the good stuff. And then I looked at the clock. 12:25. Company policy, lunch from 12 to 1. I picked up my bag and went to lunch. Now, I want you to understand, I wasn't storming out. I wasn't making a scene. I wasn't leaving a note that said, per your instructions. I just quietly did exactly what I had been told to do. I followed the policy, to the letter. The same policy my boss had stood at my desk and lectured me about 3 days prior. I took my 30-minute lunch during the approved window. What I left behind was a building with no network, a Wireshark capture running, and a ping log that would tell me everything I needed to know when I got back. I came back from lunch. I walked to my desk. My boss was standing there, this time with a different kind of energy. Not furious, something closer to frustrated but trapped, if I had to describe it. And he gave me this very tight, very deliberate, passive-aggressive little announcement. The network's back up, by the way. That was it. That was all he said. He didn't call me out. He didn't ask me where I was. He didn't say a word about the timing or the optics of the IT guy disappearing for lunch the exact moment the whole building lost connectivity. He just wanted me to know he'd noticed. And I looked at my screen, at the ping log showing me exactly when the network dropped, when it restored, and how long the whole thing had lasted. None of which I could have changed anyway, since I had no access to the equipment. And I said something like, "Oh, good. Glad it's back." That was the end of it, at least on the surface. But here's what I actually want to say, because this isn't just a funny revenge story. Though it is that. When you spend your career in skilled trades, you learn something pretty early. The person doing the work usually knows more about the work than the person managing it. Not always, but usually. And there's a version of management that understands that and leans into it. They hire the expert, they give the expert room to work, and they stay out of the way when things get complicated. And then there's the other kind, The kind that hired you to take something off their plate, but still wants to override every decision you make. The kind that ignores the fast solution in favor of the expensive one, because it feels more like getting their money's worth. The kind that watches you give up your lunch break to save their operation, and then complains about the timing. That kind of management gets exactly the level of initiative they've asked for. Not a drop more. I stayed at my desk for hours during that first crisis without being asked to. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for anything in return. I did it because that's how I was built. You finished the job. But if you're going to stand at my desk and lecture me about 30 minutes of lunch while I'm the only reason your shipping operation is back online, then yeah. When the network dies at 12:25 and there's nothing I can do about it anyway, I'm going to eat my sandwich. So tell me, if you were in my position, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have stayed at your desk, stared at a dead network you couldn't fix, and skipped lunch again? Because I'll be honest with you, I already knew the answer. I just needed my boss to teach it to me first. A random woman in the grocery store called me a hoarder and demanded I give her my ground beef. I said no, and then my own husband told me I was wrong. Okay, so I need to talk about something that happened at the grocery store, because I came home genuinely questioning my own sanity, and I think I need some outside perspective on this. Let me start by explaining something about how I grocery shop, because it actually matters here. Meat prices, specifically ground beef, have gotten kind of ridiculous lately. I don't know if you've noticed, but a pound of decent ground beef at a regular price now is what I used to consider a splurge a few years ago. So when it goes on sale, I stock up. I have a chest freezer in my garage and a vacuum sealer, and I use them. When I see a good deal, I buy in bulk, portion it out, seal it up, and I don't have to pay full price for months. It's called being a functional adult who pays attention to her grocery bill. So when I spotted a really solid sale on ground beef at my usual store, I was genuinely excited. I'd actually run out of my reserves. My freezer stash was completely empty, which almost never happens, so the timing was perfect. I get to the meat section and I see 8 packages on the shelf. Each one is somewhere between 3 and 4 pounds. I do the math in my head, think about what I actually need to refill my stock, and I put 3 packages in my cart. 3 out of 8. I left 5 on the shelf, more than half. I did not clean them out. I did not take everything. I took less than half of what was available and went about my shopping. I finished most of my trip, and then I realized I forgot one thing. It was back near the section where I'd gotten the beef, so I looped back through the store to grab it. And that's when it happened. A woman, I have never seen this person before in my life, comes up to me with serious energy, like not someone who's mildly annoyed, someone who has been stewing about something and is ready to have a whole conversation about it. And she starts telling me that I took all the ground beef, that there's none left now, that I didn't leave any for other people, that I am really rude for doing what I did. I want to pause here and just walk through the logic of what she was saying, because it did not hold together at all. First of all, I did not take all the ground beef. When I was there were 8 packages and I took 3. Were the other 5 still there? I genuinely don't know. I didn't check on my way back. I was just grabbing the item I forgot. But that's also not my job. I didn't take everything. I left the majority on the shelf. If the shelf was empty when this woman got there, that could have been me. It could have been 2 other people. It could have been a store employee pulling product. I have no idea. Second, and I really want to sit with this one, she wanted me to give her one of my packages, not ask nicely. Not say, hey, I couldn't find any, would you be willing to part with one? She came at me hot, called me rude, accused me of being selfish, and then expected me to hand over something from my own cart. I said no, and I walked away. Now look, I want to be real with you because I've thought about this a lot since it happened. If she had come up to me differently, would I have responded differently? Honestly, yeah, probably. If someone had approached me and said something like, I'm sorry to bother you, I couldn't find any ground beef, and I'm trying to make dinner tonight. Is there any chance you'd be willing to share one of your packages? I think I would have considered it. I might have said yes, because I'm a reasonable person and that would have been a reasonable human request. But that is not what happened. What happened was I got accused of hoarding by someone who had no idea how many packages were on that shelf when I got there, had no idea what I needed them for, and felt fully entitled to confront a stranger in a grocery store about the contents of their cart. And after all of that, after being called rude and selfish to my face, she expected me to reward that behavior by handing over my groceries. No, absolutely not. I also want to point out something about the timing. The store was closing in less than an hour, which means overnight restocking was going to happen. By the time the doors opened the next morning, there would almost certainly be more ground beef on that shelf. So even if I had taken every last package, the shortage wasn't permanent. It was a few hours at most. And again, I didn't take every package. I got home and I told my husband what happened, mostly because I was still a little rattled and I needed to vent. And his response was not what I was expecting. He asked me why I didn't just give her one. I explained exactly what I just told you. She didn't ask, she accused. She was rude and confrontational and acted like I owed her something, and he kind of shrugged and said I still should have given her a pack and come back another day for more. And I sat with that for a second, because on the surface it sounds reasonable, right? Be the bigger person. It's just meat. Let it go. But here's where I keep getting stuck. Why is the burden on me? Why is it my job to reward someone for treating me badly in public? If she had been kind, if she had just been a normal person having a rough day who needed a little help, I would have helped her, genuinely. But she wasn't kind, she was entitled and aggressive, and apparently that's supposed to get her further with me than basic human decency would have. I also keep coming back to the math. I took 3 packages out of 8. If I had been a different kind of shopper, if I had swept all 8 into my cart without a second thought, that would be a different conversation, but I didn't. I consciously left the majority on the shelf for other people, because I'm not actually a selfish person. I just needed to restock my freezer, and there's something else that's been bugging me. The assumption, she assumed I'd taken everything. She came at me with that assumption fully locked in, no room for the possibility that she might have the story wrong. And even if she had been right, even if I had taken all 8, there's still a version of that conversation that's normal and human, and I might have actually responded to. Hey, I noticed you have a lot of the sale beef. Any chance you have one to spare? That's fine. That's a conversation. What she did wasn't a conversation, it was an accusation. And I don't respond well to being accused of things I didn't do by strangers who have appointed themselves the grocery store police. I think what bothers me most about my husband's take is that it feels like it's coming from the same place as hers. This idea that the nice thing to do is whatever keeps the peace in the moment, regardless of whether it's actually fair. And I get that impulse. I really do. Conflict in a grocery store is awkward and unpleasant, and just handing her a pack of beef would have made it stop faster. But it also would have taught me that if I get loud and aggressive enough at a stranger, I'll get what I want. And I don't love that lesson. Here's where I genuinely want your opinion, because I've been going back and forth on this more than I'd like to admit. Was I wrong? Not for buying the beef. I'm confident about that. But for refusing to hand over a package after she confronted me? Is there a version of this where the kind move is just to absorb the rudeness and do the nice thing anyway? I keep landing on no. I keep landing on the idea that kindness freely given and kindness extracted through guilt and confrontation are 2 completely different things, and only one of them actually means anything. But maybe I'm too deep in my own head about it. Maybe I'm the person who turned a $3 decision into a whole philosophy. What would you have done if someone came at you like that in the middle of a grocery store, not asking, not being polite, just telling you that you were wrong and they deserved something you already had? Would you have handed it over? Because I walked away. And I'd do it again. But I'll admit, the fact that my husband doesn't see it the same way I do has been sitting with me a lot longer than I expected 11 pounds of ground beef to sit with me. My number got stolen and I got revenge. I have had the same cell phone number for over 30 years. 30 years. That number is mine. It's on my bank accounts, my doctor's office files, my everything. So when some complete stranger decided, apparently, sometime around 2016, that my number was going to be his number too, I want you to understand what that actually meant for my daily life. It started right before the 2016 election. Calls, texts, political phone bank volunteers, campaign staffers, roofing companies, warranty scammers. 2 states worth of spam flooding my phone every single day, multiple times a day. And it never stopped. Not after the election, not the year after, not the year after that. We're talking about nearly a decade of my personal phone number being handed out by someone I've never met, never spoken to, and have absolutely no connection to whatsoever. I want you to really sit with that for a second. Because I did. For years. We called our phone company. More than once. You already know how that went. A whole lot of nothing. No action, no resolution, no explanation for why this was even allowed to keep happening. Just me, my phone, and an endless parade of spam calls every single morning. Now here's where things get interesting. Because I am a patient person. I am. But even patient people have a limit. And after enough years of this nonsense, I stopped just being annoyed and started paying closer attention. and patience, it turns out, has its rewards. Sometime in 2024, I got a text message. It was from a realtor, professional, polite, directed at this mystery person whose calls I'd been receiving for years, asking about the sale of his home. And right there in that text was something I had never had before. A street address. I just stared at my phone for a moment. Because this guy, whoever he is, had spent the better part of a decade using my number as a shield, hiding behind it while I absorbed every scam call and political text meant for him. And now, completely by accident, he'd handed me exactly what I needed. I did what any reasonable person would do. I Googled the address, and I found a landline phone number attached to it in about 30 seconds flat. I'm not a hacker. I'm not some kind of investigator. I just used Google like a normal human being, and there it was. I called the number. It went to voicemail. A woman's voice, presumably his wife. Okay, I thought. Let me try actually reaching someone here. She picked up once, and I explained the situation. I told her that her husband had apparently been giving out my cell phone number for years and that I had been dealing with the consequences of that every single day. You know what she did? She was rude, dismissive, acted like I was the problem, hung up. And when I tried again at different points, she either didn't answer at all or repeated the same attitude. All right then. I sat back and I thought about this carefully. Because here's the thing, I'm still getting these calls every day. Roofing scammers, warranty people, political volunteers, the whole circus. I can't stop them from calling my number. The phone company won't help. The guy's wife won't help. And apparently this man, who I later found an obituary for, by the way, so he's no longer among the living, set something in motion that just kept rolling even after he was gone. So I made a decision. If these people are going to keep calling my number, looking for this address, the least I can do is make sure they actually find it. Every time a roofing company texts me now, I book an appointment. I am very helpful about it. Sometimes I schedule them for 7 in the morning, sometimes 8, sometimes noon on a random Tuesday. I mix it up, I send them a contact card with the home address and the landline number, and I politely let them know they should call the landline if they need to reach anyone for further details. I figure that's more than fair. I'm giving them a real chance to sort out the confusion before they drive over there. Some of them do call the landline, some of them don't. The ones who don't, they just show up. To the house. At whatever time I scheduled them for. And the Ouija board texts, those are my personal favorite. When I'm feeling generous and a scammer reaches out, I'll sometimes send them a link to the obituary and let them know that if they really need to get in touch, they might want to try a Ouija board. I have not received a single reply confirming that any of them took that advice. And yet the appointments keep getting made, the contractors keep showing up, life goes on. I want to be clear. I'm not doing anything that isn't already in motion. These people are already calling. They're already looking for this address. I'm just connecting the dots for them in a way that is, honestly, more accurate than what they had before. They were calling my number, looking for someone at that house. Now they have the house. That's practically a public service, I'll be honest with you. There's a part of me that has genuinely considered having my husband drive me over there one day just to sit across the street and watch. Just to see how the morning goes. For whoever's living there now. I haven't done it yet, but I'm not ruling it out. Nearly a decade of spam calls. Years of someone else's mess landing in my lap every single day. And all it took was one careless realtor text to flip the whole thing around. So I ask you, knowing everything I just told you, am I wrong for enjoying this as much as I do? Because I have thought about it, and I genuinely cannot find it in myself to feel bad, not even a little.